All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that, well, it gets you thinking. We're stepping into a virtual world to ask a really personal question. Who are you really when you think nobody's watching?
I mean, seriously, think about it for a second. When you pick up that controller, do you just check your real-world morals at the door? Or do they actually come with you, guiding your in-game choices? Well, we stumbled upon a story that gives a pretty incredible answer to that exact question.
Okay, so our story kicks off with a major conflict. I'm talking a real clash between the way a game is supposed to be played and the personal, deeply held ethics of the play.
So here's the puzzle, right? On one hand, you've got this game, The Trail, and its whole point is to reward you for stuff like hunting and gathering resources. But on the other hand, the player created their avatar inspired by a real person named Noam, who lives by a philosophy of veganism and deep compassion. So, what do? How on earth do you play a game that's built on rewarding the very things you are against?
And look, this was never about getting the highest score or, beating the game like you normally would. No, the player's goal was way more personal. It was about seeing if they could live out their values in a place that was practically designed to challenge them at every turn.
And you can see their motivation so clearly in this quote. The avatar, who they named Evernome, wasn't made to win or make a bunch of in-game money. It was created to be a reminder of what's really important. We're talking compassion, preservation, balance. This wasn't about getting some virtual achievement. It was a statement.
So how did they solve this ethical puzzle? Did they just quit the game? Nope. Instead, they did something amazing. They created this incredibly detailed set of rules for their avatar, a personal code of conduct which we're calling the Evernome Doctrine.
Think of it like a personal constitution, and it governed every single thing Evernote did, kicking off with a very strict list of don'ts.
And when I say specific, I mean incredibly specific. 0 hunting, no fishing. Any quest that involved harming an animal, just skipped it. But it went even further than that. Any stuff they had from before they created this doctrine, from old hunts, couldn't be sold for a profit. So this wasn't just about the future. It was about making things right from the past, too.
Naturally, this commitment carried over to whatever Noam ate. The diet was strictly vegan. All food had to come from farming or foraging within the game. That means no meat, no eggs, no cheese. Just stop and think about that for a second. The player deliberately made the game so much harder for themselves, all to stick to their principles.
Okay, so what did they do with all the non-vegan stuff they already had in their inventory from the early days? Well, the system they came up with was just as principled. First, they sorted it all out. Things like old leathers were just tucked away in hidden chests, never to be used again. And the really valuable stuff, like old fur toys, they just put them in the public city chests for anyone to take. They gave up all the profit.
But just like in real life, a simple rulebook doesn't always work for the messy gray areas, right? The Evernome Doctrine couldn't just be a rigid set of laws. It had to be more of a living philosophy, something that could adapt to tricky situations.
And this leads to a classic ethical question. Let's say you see some leather for sale, but someone else did the hunting. Or what if another player gives you a fur coat as a gift? Does that do no harm rule still count if you weren't the one who, did the harm? This is where the whole doctrine really got put to the test.
And the answer they landed on, it wasn't a simple yes or no. It wasn't about just adding another bullet point to the rulebook. The solution was more about an intention, a state of mind. It was about consciously choosing every single day to gently bring every action back to that one core value. Compassion.
Here's a perfect example of that nuance in action. So the doctrine says, no cutting down trees for your own profit. Simple enough. But what if the town, the whole community, needs wood to grow and expand? Well, in that specific case, an exception is made. The axe comes out, but it's used carefully, not for personal gain, but for the good of the group. That's a huge difference, right? It's the distinction between selfishness and service.
So let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway here? I mean, beyond this one player and this one game, what does the story of Evernome really tell us about our digital lives and the values we carry around with us?
It really brings us to this powerful idea of the avatar acting as a bridge. See, Evernome wasn't just some pixels on a screen. It was a bridge connecting the player's real-world values to their virtual identity. It was the thing that allowed their deepest principles to cross over and actually mean something in a digital world.
When you get right down to it, this whole thing was an act of love and respect. The player's ultimate goal was to build a virtual space that truly reflected the real Noam's values, to create a digital sanctuary, a world of balance, preservation, and quiet presence, where he would feel right at home. And that brings us full circle, right back to the beginning. But now the question is for you. This story, it's not really about one person or one game. It's about all of us and the choices we make every time we log in. So what values do you carry across that bridge into your virtual worlds? And what kind of world are you building with your digital self? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.